Hey guys, as many of you know, I enjoy playing multiplayer. I guess SOS falls into that category too, since we're on that topic. But that's not the point I'm trying to get at today. Multiplayer offers much more range in the overall experience of Monster Hunter, and the people that you meet in public lobbies can quickly become your regular group of hunting friends. I want to dedicate today's video to 5 things that I see my speedrunner friends and multiplayer gods do to maximize their effectiveness in multiplayer, and how they are able to absolutely humiliate what are considered the most difficult hunts in the game when they play together. I listed the 2 basic components at the very top, but if you want to skip right on ahead to the advanced tips, I'm going to put a timestamp for you advanced players right there. First things first, your build in multiplayer is ever so slightly different than in single player. In Monster Hunter, friendly fire takes place in a different way. When a teammate's attack hits you, it will give you a small flinch when these attacks make contact. These flinches can interrupt your attacks, hinder your mobility, and even potentially put you in a sticky situation causing a cart. Any multiplayer enjoyer that's worth their salt will put in a brace decoration, as flinch-free level 1 is enough to remove all small flinches. Keep in mind that this will not make you completely immune to friendly fire, but it'll keep your dual blade friends from doing the Monster Hunter World's version of the Hokuto Shinken on you. Being able to stay on top of the best hit zones of your monster, while being able to ignore your teammates' attacks for the most part, will allow you to perform as naturally as you would in a single player. So you are able to perform the other 4 parts to becoming a god of multiplayer. The second tip to becoming a multiplayer god is understanding weapon tenderizes. Everyone knows that you can clutch claw and do weapon attack to create white parts on the monster. However, now that you are in multiplayer, it is time to understand that not all weapon tenderize attacks are the same. If you are using a light weapon, you will realize that most of them require a shaver decoration in order to complete a tenderizing attack, but they have much faster animations compared to heavy weapons. Even then, some weapons, such as the dual blades and sword and shield, have tenderizing attacks built into their kit, reducing the need to use the shaver decoration entirely. I feel like right now will be a good idea to do a quick overview of each weapon's tenderizing attack, starting with the Greatsword. Big chunky damage with a one-hit tenderize without a shaver decoration. It's a little bit slow, so the animation will probably eat into the next attack. The location where you land is pretty close too, so you make sure you have a very clear opening before you go in for it. Honestly, I feel like the time is better spent towards putting up a TCS. The Sword and Shield. Fast attack that normally requires 2 tenderizing attacks without a shaver decoration. After completing the attack, you will land a small distance away from the monster, which is suboptimal for DPS most of the time. I definitely recommend using the Sword and Shield to tenderize if no one else is doing it, but you'll likely get a permanent weak zone on important parts just by using the Claw Shoryuken whenever the monster claggers. Dual Blades. Another light weapon with a fast attack. The claw attack from Spinning Rising Slash is a little slow, but if you have the opportunity to perform the tenderizing attack from it, the damage, speed, and ending distance makes this weapon a great one to use. Even without the Rising Spinning Slash clutch attack, the raw tenderized attack is still fast, although lacking in damage, and puts you right underneath the monster so you can follow up. The Longsword. The Longsword has one of the best tenderizing attacks, with medium damage that puts you right underneath your tenderized location. Since the Longsword has low gearing requirements for the most part, most players will be able to fit in a shaver decoration without sacrificing any important skills. For multiplayer, this is definitely the weapon to take advantage of its fast tenderize to create weak spots without sacrificing too much uptime. Hammer. The Hammer is a single hit tenderize, with good damage and medium speed on the animation. Combined with its ability to clutch claw out of some attacks, this weapon is one of the better heavy weapons for a tenderize. Hunting Horn. The Hunting Horn, like the Hammer, requires only a single hit to tenderize. And this is what I feel like is one of the faster weapons to tenderize, as it has a fast transition to a clutch claw and a decent tenderize speed. The Lance. This is another heavy weapon with only one tenderizing attack that is needed for the weak spot. However, transition to claw attack does take a long time, so I recommend using the claw counter to perform the clutch claw instead. In the majority of cases, a claw counter will put you into position to safely tenderize and has decent damage. Although you would use the claw counter for certain follow-ups, I wouldn't go out of my way to tenderize exclusively. Gun Lance. The Gun Lance is a light weapon, surprisingly enough, so you need to do 2 attacks without the shaver decoration. However, it has relatively low damage, but has the additional utility of reloading all your shells and wormstake. Most of the time, other light weapons have a better tenderize than you, but if you're the only light weapon and you have a shaver decoration, go for it. The Switch Axe. The Switch Axe is a heavy weapon with a tenderized animation similar to that of the hunting horn. However, I think that the Clutch Claw transition feels slower in exchange for having a Clutch Claw extender from a standing ZSD. Unfortunately, the sluggishness of the transition to Clutch Claw means that it is slightly less favorable compared to the hunting horn. The Charge Blade is another heavy weapon with an extremely slow tenderizing animation that makes going for the attack very undesirable. You wouldn't want to be using the tenderizing attack almost ever with this weapon, unless you have only greatswords and heavy bowguns on your team. Insect Glaive. The Glaive is a light weapon with a decent tenderized attack animation, good damage, and has a dismount that lands nearby for good positions to follow up. It is a little bit of work to enter the Clutch Claw from the ground, but having the tool available while both grounded and in the air makes the Insect Glaive a versatile weapon that can easily find windows to tenderize. The Bow. Bows are light weapons with a fast tenderizing attack. Although the damage is quite lacking, and it launches your character a good distance, I find the tenderize not wholly undesirable if your melee weapons seem to refuse to tenderize. Light Bowgun. Similar to the bow, the light bowgun has a very fast tenderizing attack, with a small launch that takes you out of the immediate area underneath. But it is much better than the bow in terms of overall usability and follow-ups. Definitely a weapon to tenderize when possible. Heavy Bowgun. This weapon should never be tenderizing, almost ever in a regular scenario, as almost everything about the tenderizing attack is very bad. The only redeeming quality about it is the Heavy Bowgun completes the tenderize in a respectable time when you use the Wyvern Snipe version of Heavy Bowgun. However, you would lose a lot of damage, and the resulting dismount usually puts you out of range to immediately follow up with further attacks. If you're using a Heavy Bowgun, you'd probably only be tenderizing if your team of pubs has the combined brain capacity of a caveman. Now, I'll move on to some slightly less obvious concepts that players can be mindful of in multiplayer. And the first one is positioning. One of the reasons speedrunner teams seem like they can finish hunts so quickly is because their positioning is very disciplined. For most monsters, attacking the head will result in the highest damage. Therefore, players should ideally position themselves to minimize the chances of the monster turning around, cutting off good hit zones from their allies. As an added bonus, this allows players to line up punishes on the head alongside their team, meeting flinch and stagger thresholds much faster to extend their punish windows. What I like to do is draw a cone stemming from their chest towards their forelegs in my head. By staying within this imaginary cone, you will be able to react and sidestep away from most monster attacks in the game, while being in a good place to follow up the attack with a powerful punish on the head. There are times when you do not want to be in this imaginary cone, and 9 times out of 10, it's to position your character so that you will not end up in an unfavorable location. I'm sure everyone has experienced carding, due to it being caught between a monster using a lingering attack and the terrain. Having an understanding of your immediate position will allow players to slowly bait movements and attacks towards a more favorable location. One of the most obvious examples in this case is moving Fatalis closer towards the gate near the end of Phase 2 to avoid people from being caught too far out of position and causing unnecessary carts. The next bit I want to talk about is attack timings and maximizing the windows that you're given. Even if you are in the best position possible, it wouldn't mean anything if you or your team is not able to get a massive punish despite the opportunity. Greatsword players, as well as a few other weapons, needs a few seconds to set up their biggest punish, the True Charge Slash. Nothing feels worse than having a TCS-3 locked, only to have the monster get flinch shot prematurely. In a multiplayer setting, being aware of weapon timings and drawing out every last bit of a punish for your teammate is just as crucial as being able to deal the damage yourself. This is the same logic as to why you wouldn't want players to be using Dragon Pods during a Fatalis Cone without a good reason, as the resulting flinch can deny a few thousand damage on the head. Another punish that players should be wary of is the Clagger. Players have around 6 seconds from the start of the animation to use the Clutch Claw on a staggered monster, which can refresh the duration. Players should take advantage of this window by waiting a few seconds before using the Clutch Claw. On average, a decent player can deal approximately 100 damage per second, meaning that if the player using the Clutch Claw did not use an attack at all, their team can squeeze out an extra 1,500 damage compared to a team that uses the Clutch Claw immediately. One of the last components to being a god of multiplayer is to understand items and their interactions with the monster, as some of these items can create openings and windows for punishing monsters if used and placed at the right time. Some of the common uses of items you may see in multiplayer would include using a flash pod as Safi Jiva flies up to cancel the Nova, or using smoke bombs to force Fatalis to land and make it look around. Both of these item usages will open up opportunities for your team to deal more damage while saving on time. One of the last well-known uses of items, as you will occasionally see people do, is the flash pod for monsters that are escaping. For example, as Velkhana takes off to fly back to Zone 1, you can use a flash pod to immediately down the Velkhana, so that players have another attempt to punish Velkhana as it falls. As it flies off a second time, and you flash pod it again, it will always use an ice beam downwards and then land. Being aware of these item usages and the openings they create would instantly make you stand out among other players. Since this is not an exhaustive list, feel free to drop any item uses and their guaranteed interactions that you know about in the comments below for your fellow hunters. That wraps up the 5 things that you can do to stand out in multiplayer. Some of these components require some conscious effort and thought at first, but once you get used to performing them, you will see your team, either with friends or with randoms, get faster clear times. If you feel like the video helped you out, consider dropping a like to help boost the video for the algorithm. And if you want to play some multiplayer with me, feel free to check out my Twitch streams at 8 PM PST on Monday, Thursday, and Saturdays. I hope everyone has a good time playing multiplayer, and I'll see you next time.